Nak, kaya pa? Okay po.
Nak, may pamerienda tayo dun, ha? Mahusay, anak. Nak, ikaw munang bahala dito.
Ako po?
Yung investors, close the deal. I trust you.
When the moment demands it, the only path forward is to choose courage.
Sir. This is too inefficient. I'm sure there's a better way.
Not just to face what's in front of you, but to transform.
Hi sir, nice to meet you. Anna from Glow Business.
It's the decision to grow, to push beyond limits, and to reshape your own potential. It's choosing not just to endure, but to turn challenges into progress. Doubt into determination, and fear into fuel.
Nak?
Kamusta?
Pa, you're supposed to be resting.
Something wrong at the plant?
Kakayanin naman po. I've got a lot of help behind me.
That's good.
Before we start the Liveable Cities Lab, please take a moment to watch the safety briefing on the screen. Please all rise for the Philippine National Anthem.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiliw, teras ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sa dikit mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, kuyagan ang magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisigil, sa nagtatagtulog sa simoy at sa langit mong pagaw, ay hinagang tulad, awit sa pagkayang minamahal, ang isang lang matawad mo'y tagumpay na naghihiling, ang bituin at araw niya kailan ang may maghihiling, luman ang araw ng walang pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo, ang inigaya na pagkay mga aking, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
You may now take your seats. As we begin today's lab, direct your attention to the screen for a few important reminders. Thank you everyone for joining us for our first Liveable Cities Lab of the year. We are excited to have you here as we explore how data can drive sustainable and competitive cities. To officially kick off today's event, it is my privilege to introduce Mr. Guillermo M, Chairman of the Liveable Cities Philippines and Chairman of the Rizalino S. Navarro Policy Center for Competitiveness at the Asian Institute of Management. Please join me in giving him a warm welcome as he shares his opening remarks.
Thank you. Okay, third time's a charm. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our first Livable Cities Lab of the year. To our distinguished guests, speakers, and participants joining us here on site at Asian Institute of Management, and those tuning in via Zoom and Facebook, thank you for being with us here today. This event is made possible through our partnership with the League of Cities of the Philippines, Globe Telecom, and Coca-Cola Philippines. Cities are the heartbeat of modern society, hubs of opportunity, innovation, and community. Yet they also face complex challenges that demand bold, forward-thinking solutions. This year's theme, Sustain+Ability, Enabling Cities of the Future, underscores our commitment to sustainability and equipping cities with the tools, knowledge, and partnerships needed to drive transformative change. By building their capabilities, Livable Cities Labs empower cities to lead the way toward a more sustainable, inclusive, and resilient future. But how do we achieve this vision? It begins with data. Often overlooked, data is far more than numbers or statistics. It is the foundation of analysis and informed decision-making, the catalyst for innovation, and the key to unlocking the full potential of our cities. In an era of rapid urbanization and technological advancement, data has become a critical driver of progress. For Philippine cities, harnessing data effectively is essential to boosting competitiveness, improving public services, and fostering sustainable growth. It allows us to identify challenges, optimize resources, and implement evidence-based solutions that deliver lasting impact. Our theme for today's Livable Cities Lab is Data and the City. We'll explore how cities can leverage data to unlock their potential. We'll examine initiatives that use data as a benchmarking tool, highlight its role in guiding decision-making, and showcase how it can help build a more competitive, sustainable, and livable Philippines. We'll also learn more about the Cities and Municipalities Competitiveness Index, or CMCI, how it started, what it measures, how it is used by LGUs, its importance, and why we should continue to protect and make this important database more transparent and accessible to the public and to city and municipal mayors. In the age of AI, we all need more clean and accurate data sets to use in models and algorithms which will be used to help analyze trends. Among our speakers today, we are privileged to have two of the original economists who helped develop the CMCI since its inception 13 years ago. Ms. Ofelia Templo, Special Assistant to the Secretary of the Department of Social Welfare and Development, will discuss the rationale and importance of measuring city competitiveness. Dr. Alvin Ang, Senior Researcher at the Center for Strategic and Policy Studies, will join us online from Brunei and delve into the role of data and the Cities and Municipalities Index in shaping the Philippines' competitiveness landscape. We are also honored to listen to Mayor Ferdinand Estrella from the city of Baliwag, Bulacan. He'll explain how Baliwag successfully used CMCI data to drive local competitiveness. And finally, Mr. Abel Capco, Senior Manager at Globe Telecom, will explore and explain how data insights guide private sector growth and investment. So together, let's embark on this journey to empower our cities and shape a brighter future. So let's move on and start this program. I think it's going to be a very thought-provoking, eye-opening program. And let's start with our first speaker, a good friend of mine, Ofelia Templo. She's a distinguished macroeconomist and business process reengineering specialist with nearly 20 years of experience in government service and development planning. Currently serving as special assistant to the Secretary of the DSWD, she is a staunch advocate for regulatory reforms and has played a key role in streamlining business permits and licensing systems in cities like Pasig, Manila, and Quezon City. Ofi is one of the original architects of the Cities and Municipalities Competitiveness Index, CMCI, a critical tool for measuring and improving city competitiveness across the Philippines. So it is my great pleasure to invite a very good friend to explain the rationale and importance of measuring city competitiveness. Let's please welcome Ofelia Templo.
Thank you very much, Bill, for the introduction. Good afternoon to everyone. First of all, let me thank Bill and Liveable Cities Philippines for inviting me this afternoon for this event. You know, preparing for this topic made me a bit nostalgic because it brought back memories of my 46 years career wearing different hats. And this forum is quite timely because you know, even when I was at NEDA, the problem of foreign investments, the Philippines lagging behind other countries in terms of foreign investment inflows was there. That was like how many years ago? And today it remains to be a problem. So the issue is, is the Philippines not attractive? Or maybe we should be solving the issue of lackluster investments in a different way. So let me start by, as a prologue to my some caveats first. No? So Bill, it's been like more than 10 years since I lectured and I taught in Ateneo. So my apologies if I run through a lot of the concepts and some of the documents that I'm going to cite may be dated, especially for those of you who are urban economists. But let me start by giving you a summary of my work. Nasaan yung, eto pala, sorry ha, amo? Okay. This is the problem with an old person trying to, okay. See, so as a prologue to my presentation, let me give you a summary of my work as a way of, to explain to you the motivation behind the way I'm going to present today's briefing. So I was a macroeconomist for 20 years in NEDA. And if for some of you who are economists, you would recognize that picture there. That's Jeffrey Sachs. So I had the opportunity of working with Jeffrey Sachs when he was here, and also Paul Krugman when he came here in the 90s, the early 90s. And after I retired from NEDA in my mid-40s, I was engaged in various development agencies as a local government specialist. So I went through World Bank and USAID, and I focused more on modernizing business permitting systems. And in the last 2 years, I continue to work on business process reforms, but this time focusing on fast-tracking assistance for the poor. Now, because of my background, ayaw niya. Okay, I need to be the one. Okay, sorry, my apologies here. Is it? It's working. Okay, so I go back. Ayan, okay. Okay, so because of my background, so I'll focus first on, you know, what we used to do in NEDA, which is focus on economic growth. But the end all of development is not economic growth. It's really poverty reduction, or If you look at the Philippine Development Plan now, so it's quite complicated, but they have a long-term plan there. The long-term plan talks about, hindi ko na makita, no? Secure and panatag na buhay ng Pilipino, meaning that the Philippines development long-term goal is prosperous, morally middle-class society where no one is poor and people have long and healthy lives. So for this administration, the development objective is economic and social transformation that will lead to a prosperous, inclusive, and resilient society. In other words, the main goal of everything that we're doing is really social development, but expressed in more sophisticated language. For the economists among you, the way we compute for economic growth, GNP, is on the demand side, you have the usual consumption, government expenditures, investment, etc., exports, imports, and of course, net factor income from abroad. From the supply side, you have the agriculture, industry, and services. But when I left NEDA, this was like my bread and butter in NEDA. So every day, I would look at economic forecasts, Bloomberg, I would churn out inflation and GNP forecasts. But when I left NEDA, there's this new economic growth theory, which actually opened my mind on, okay, when you talk about growth, you don't only talk about demand and supply side, that cities are drivers of growth. There became a locational perspective when you look at growth. So this was started by Paul Krugman in the mid-1990s, and he actually got a Nobel Prize. He was a Nobel Prize winner sometime in 2008 because of his work on new economic geography. And 2009, the World Bank came out with a report, Reshaping Economic Geography. This actually inspired me and made me think about how we were doing things in NEDA. That you need to look at the geographical perspective when you look at economic growth. So as a result of that, actually the World Bank report also gave us this perspective that economic growth will be unbalanced. So when we were in NEDA sometime in the early 80s, talagang balanced economic growth was what we were espousing for. But after so many years, unbalanced pa rin yung growth. No? So that gave us, that brought to mind that maybe there should be another approach at inclusive growth. So this is a segue to my presentation actually this afternoon, which will consist of looking at city competitiveness definition, the beginnings of measuring subnational competitiveness, why we need to measure city competitiveness, and some challenges. Okay, so ADB, because it was the vogue at the time, ADB came up with the city cluster economic development. And in the process, they differentiated Michael Porter and Paul Krugman's theories. And Michael Porter was focusing on nations, competitive nations, while Paul Krugman was saying nations do not compete against each other in any real sense. It's rather firms and cities, which are the competitors. And in the city, the brochure of City Cluster Economic Development, I highlighted this, that it says that by better understanding the city's attributes of competitiveness, policymakers and investors can better foster key investments that will lead to enhanced competition. So this highlights the importance, the role of cities when you talk about economic growth. Okay, so I will borrow the definition of what makes a city competitive from the ADB. The competitiveness of cities refers to the ability of an urban region of cities to produce and market a set of products, goods and services that represent good value, not necessarily lowest price, in relation to comparable products of other urban regions. So if you look at this definition, it focuses on production. It focuses on firms' ability to produce and market these goods. Okay, going back to the theoretical development after Paul Krugman's new economic geography. The concept of economic growth, graduated or developed into what is now known as sustainable development. And there's a difference in the two definitions, economic growth and sustainable development, in that in the latter, it has the concept of ensuring the ability of future generations to meet their own need. So from economic growth, sustainable development, if you look at, this was, by the way, started by the World Economic Forum way back in 2011. And in the report 2011 to 2012, they came up with a set of indicators explaining sustainable competitiveness index. And in relation to that, there are differences in regulatory implications of those two concepts. So competitive cities, this is borrowed from the IFC's competitiveness doing business report. These are some of the concerns when you talk about competitive cities: starting a business, registering property, enforcing contracts, resolving insolvency, entry and exit of firms. But when you talk about sustainable competitive cities, just now start discussing land use regulation, urban growth boundaries, density regulations, emission standards. So there's a difference in terms of implications on the role of government when you talk about these two concepts. And because that was the vogue during that time, even the United Nations actually came up with a goal 11, which is inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable cities. So this would show you that from competitive cities, the concept evolved into sustainable competitive cities. Now let's go to this is the theoretical frame, but let's now go to the measurement. Okay, so US aid, which is very popular now, the favorite of President Trump, actually had a very big role to play in the development of indicators for Philippine competitiveness. So I was, by coincidence, involved in the first project, LinkEG, where one of their components is measuring factors of competitiveness. And they gave a grant, actually, to IFC to develop this study on subnational doing business for the Philippines. And they gave another grant to AIM, 2009, for their Philippine City Competitiveness Ranking Project. Just way of a background, in 2003, AIM started this project with 50 cities. So sila talaga they were the ones who started this measurement of city competitiveness. Following the LinkEG project, I became the chief of party of Invest. And the Invest project of USAID actually thought about, why don't we revisit the framework and come up with a more practical way of measuring competitiveness. And this is the time that Alvin Ang was engaged by the project. He was then involved in UST. And that was also the time that the National Competitiveness Council was very active under Bill Luz. So Bill Luz was very receptive in taking care of the institutional mechanism for data gathering for at the time, it is called Philippine Cities and Municipalities Competitiveness Index. No? So because I borrowed this from Alvin Ang's work, and you can see the way he formulated the index, but I will not go into this because I think this will also explain he will also explain this to you later on. So, but just the message here is, he tried to look at all the indicators on the global side and on the local side and came up with this 3 initial pillars of subnational competitiveness, which is economic dynamism, government efficiency, and infrastructure. Okay, my project also funded the first summit on competitiveness way back in 2013. That is the DTI secretary, and the second competitiveness summit also a year after what is the difference between the two? In the first summit, Alvin Ang computed all the indices. In the second summit, DTI started to be in charge of computing for the indices. So this is a way of institutionalizing the measurement of competitiveness, okay? So just to show you that the development of the index in 2012, there were 3 indicators. 2017, after the vogue about sustainability, we had the resilience indicator, and 2021, they added the innovation indicator after the law was passed in 2020. There's a law on, I don't know the exact name of the law, but there was a law that encouraged innovation. So, but please note that innovation is not something new, that in the global indices, innovation was a factor. But in the case of the Philippines, what was difficult was the measurement of innovation at the local level. So that was what constrained us from including innovation. So what is the rationale for measuring city competitiveness? This is my own personal, based on my experience, that at the local government level, it can lead to international transformational leadership. Why? Because you now present to your city local chief executives the concept of city competitiveness. That's very vague, but for them with the CMCI, they now understand the components of city competitiveness. And because of that, because of the data that is generated, they're now able to comply with the preparation of CLUP, the city's land use plan, the city development plan, the CDIP, the investment plan. So because they're able to do planning better, so they're able to develop their programs also in a better way. So, and also this data actually gives them more informed and evidence-based policymaking. I was talking to one of the mayors, and he was lamenting why he was not ranking very high. And when he looked at the data, we were not providing the data that's needed. So, and he gave his staff instructions to make sure that the data will be generated and analyzed. So this is the more or less the reason why, in summary, why you need to measure city competitiveness. It's because you want to generate the outcomes, both at the local and the national level. Now, some uses of data, this is my favorite. If you ask the Philippine government, what is the number of establishments in the Philippines? The only source of data is CMCI. Okay. The PSA data is based on surveys. Okay. Now, this is also my favorite, investment, employment, labor productivity, investment at the city level and the municipal level. And then size of establishments, gender, you will be surprised, but you'll be able to generate how many establishments, small, medium, large, are female-headed, okay? And then the impact, I did a paper on the impact of ECQ on establishments and employment using CMCI data. So what challenges? Data availability and accuracy. I don't have time to explain it, but I would have loved to. Different definitions and methodologies, data collection, the analysis and use of the data at the local level. Usually they don't have the capacity to analyze, they just generate the data. And political interference, meaning some of the city mayors would complain, bakit kami, how come our ranking is very low? So that is something that is pressuring the government to review and probably to stop the generation of the data. And I'd like to end with this, that the key message that cities are drivers of growth. If you're looking at economic growth, you have to look at how cities are performing. And at the national government, my advice is please continue to generate the data. And to the extent possible, let's identify the key agency that should generate the data. What is the focal agency? And as with other surveys, you need to refine the methodology. No methodology naman is cast in stone, di ba? So continuous improvement should be done. At the LGU level, the capacity to informed decision-making will be enhanced with the use of CMCI data. And the academe, I would pray that please deepen the analysis of events or trends at the local level using CMCI data, and please assist the government in refining the methodology. At the end of the day, I think the use of CMCI data at the local and national level will actually contribute to the achievement of the Philippine development goal. But this is my fear. If you discontinue the data now for 3 years while your national data is boasting of improvement in your GNP and your economic growth, you would have no data at the local level to identify which cities are actually contributing to this growth. Sayang po. No? So I would really push for everybody, academia and you, to push for the continuance of the generation of CMCI. So with that, sorry if my apologies, I exceeded the time, but I hope that you learned something from the briefing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ofi. That was excellent. And I'll tell you that Ofi speaks from a great deal of experience when she talks about the pluses and the challenges behind the data. And this is a discussion we had every year since we founded the CMCI back in 2012. Is that every year we would always go through a discussion, a very detailed discussion with all the regional committees on the validity of the data, the accuracy of the data, because you know how it is. It's garbage in, garbage out. You know, we need to get really good quality data into the mix. And so I think that's a point that Ofi stresses well. The second really is in the early days, people were not used, cities were not used to submitting data, so they were wondering why their ranking is so low. And you know, once they got used to submitting data, they realized the power of data. And so this is why we're so wary of political interference in the data, because it's important to keep continuing to collect data. Because if you want to build up a good data set over time, this is a good start. You know, it's a very old, not very old, but it's a relatively old data set. And this type of data, when put into AI models, and it's clean data, is very useful data. So, Ofi, thank you for that. Our next speaker, it's my honor to also introduce Dr. Alvin Ang, who will be joining us online from Brunei, where he's currently a researcher. Dr. Ang is a distinguished economist and senior researcher at the Center for Strategic and Policy Studies. With over 30 years' experience in economic development and policy analysis, he has advised the Philippine government and international organizations like the World Bank and ADB. He holds a PhD in applied economics from Osaka University and has served as chair of the economics department at Ateneo de Manila University. As I said early on, he is the other side of the dynamic duo with Ofelia Templo. He's one of the pioneers in creating the Cities and Municipalities Competitiveness Index, or CMCI, and did a lot of the heavy lifting in the early days and continues to be involved in the CMCI. So today is good to see Alvin online. He will share his expertise on the role of data in driving competitiveness and evidence-based policymaking. Let's give a warm welcome to Alvin Ang, all the way from Brunei. Alvin, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bill. Good afternoon to everyone. Well, thank you for the opportunity to share my side of the story of the CMCI. Thank you, Ofi, for sharing your ideas and your experiences as well. So I hope my screen is visible to everyone now. Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah, it's there. All right. Well, I'm going to share with you some of the thoughts when we were developing this CMCI and the data sets that were developed through the years, and also the challenges that we faced during the process, up to the present. Just short outline. What was the original intent? I think Ofi did. You did say that, Ofi. I'll say it. And then the development of the idea, process, results, and the outcomes. Just to share that the original intent of this of the CMCI at first was that the project Invest were under Ofi Templo, Ofi and Nick Agustin, who were my former bosses at NEDA, approached me to or asked me to come up with proxy measurement of GDP at the local government level. So this was um, a measurement that is not present. We know that the provinces are growing, regions are growing, but we don't know where and how each city and each municipality is contributing to this growth. Because the only available data at that point was that of the regional GDP that was produced by the then NSCB, now PSA. Um, so why is it important? We know that there's already that, as Ofi mentioned earlier, there was already a work on competitiveness at that time, and we want to pinpoint and connect the connections of the global rankings to the municipalities. We want to find out what are the economic strengths and weaknesses that could lead to the global to this local GDP outcomes, and allow comparisons so that we will know what is it that is lacking in one city that they can help focus on to improve and trigger catch-ups. Um, and what is the best place to start that is the city, because they are really where we see economic activities. And just like what Ofi was mentioning earlier, the question of where the resources are concentrated and how they can generate investments. So it is really the city where we want to work on. The development of this idea is that if we are ranking at the global level, so through the IMD, the Global Competitiveness Report, they're ranking the Philippines. But we don't know who or what place in the Philippines is contributing to all of these rankings. So we want to connect it from the global, going down to the local and going back up to the global. So we know which areas can be improved on, or what areas can be extended to, and more help can be given through policy and other matters. Ofi also mentioned about this earlier. What is the basis of competitiveness here? Is it economic development per se, or are we talking about something else? So what I did when I was tasked to do this work was to come up with a theoretical basis. And yes, there were already a lot of work done at that time. Michael Porter at that time was changing his ideas from competitiveness of cities, competitive advantage of cities, and now bringing it down also to local level understanding, which is now called he calls it the microeconomics of competitiveness. So this is basically competitiveness is based on location and productivity. So it's about two things here. So location and productivity. And that productivity here, basically, what we're trying to find out here is that the output that can be produced by the resources in a particular locality. So he is suggesting that over time, if a locality is able to create prosperity, meaning by improving its productivity over time, then it will become competitive and it will lead to economic development. And that's not stagnant, that is continuing to increase over time. So this is basically the theoretical foundation of competitiveness in the CMCI. So yes, you may have the local advantage, But if the resources are not properly used, then that advantage of the locational advantage is not going to go into development or competitiveness. So it has to be developed, just like what happened to Singapore, for example, geographically advantaged area, Hong Kong geographically advantaged area, but they have to invest to improve the productivity of the area. So they created that part so that it becomes an inherited prosperity. In comparison to regions where they are dependent on natural resources without improving the or creating productivity over time, then once the natural resource is finished, then prosperity will also go. So this is where we want to bring into consciousness the importance of competitiveness as a sustainable kind of activity, not just a one time. So that's also the reason why every year there is this survey or there is this index being done. So these are the questions that we were asked when we were trying to do this. Competitive, how easy to start a business, what is the cost of doing business. But we know it is difficult to gather data. And the sustainability of data gathering is affected by funding. So that even if you do surveys, they will be just snapshots of activities in time. But you really want to have this a regular up to date, year to year, to the extent possible, collection of data. So how did we integrate all of these ideas? There were these already existing ideas or activities about competitiveness. So there's the IMD competitiveness survey, the Global Competitiveness Index, the World Bank Doing Business report. There is that every year our GDP, the labor force survey, price indices. The AIM also did the first city or provincial competitiveness rankings. The ADB and the LGPMS report, CBMS reports, they're all present already during the time that we were developing this. So we took note of this and used them in our preparation. But what is the core basis of all of this? I looked at three critical under the radar studies that were existing in other countries that they were being done. This is the Chief Economic Development Society survey done in the UK, the Local Government Economic Indicators Framework in New Zealand, and the Polycom Economic Strength Rankings in the US. So from these three, I tried to integrate what is it that these three local government level rankings were doing and what were the metrics that they're being used. So you will see in your screen these three elements, these three frameworks and in their individual elements, and you will see that there are similarities in them. They're not straightforward the same, but you can see that there are similarities. So from there, and just like what Ofi showed you earlier, I tried to put in all of what is existing in the Philippines and what is existing globally. So put them all together and find out where they intersect. And the intersection is what became the first three pillars, which is economic dynamism, government efficiency, and infrastructure. So that was the initial framework in 2013. So when we had that, but it's not just that after that we made them as the final three pillars. There are theoretical bases. So economic dynamism, I found a basis from another Nobel Prize in Economics, Edmund Phelps, on the theoretical basis for economic dynamism in localities. And then for government efficiency, the work of Laporta et al. In 1999 as well. And infrastructure is a no-brainer because we have seen that every expanding economy invested a lot in its infrastructure. So these three were put together. But the next step now that we have pillars is what are the indicators that will comprise these pillars. So we use the one that we got from the UK, the CEDOS the principle of identifying those indicators, and it was a very challenging task to identify them. So the uh, principles were is called fee, no? Few in number, easy to collect, easy to understand, effective measures of performance. So if you can go through the CMCI, they have a database, you will find all of this. These are all taken from their website, the different indicators, no? So I'm just quickly showing them to you. I think the secretary will share the slides later. Um, but you know, it was clean like this, but the process was so tedious, as Ofi will share to you later if there's an opportunity in Q&A. The original list of indicators that I came up with was subjected to a pilot test with the other project that was ongoing and cooperating with Invest, which is the LGSP led. These were tested in Batangas, Iloilo, and Cagayan de Oro. And then after which, after the testing, it was presented, the framework and the list of indicators were presented to NCC in November of 2012. And that is where a series of consultations started until the formation of or using the existing regional competitiveness councils under the NCC, where a lot of meetings happened. I think the first one, if I remember right, was in Cebu, where it was more difficult than my PhD defense because I was sitting in a, a room filled with a group of people trying to say that this is the most important indicator, this is the most important indicator. So I have to use all theoretical basis to justify each of the indicators that we identified. So this became the CMCI using this process was an annual process. As Bill had mentioned, every year after it was finished, we will come and meet and try to understand what are the challenges and problems and how it can be improved. So the indicator is actually very simple. To compute it, I use the formula of the Human Development Index, which is very simple, so that everybody can do it on their own. No need for not even a master's degree is required to be able to compute this data. You know, it's a simple formula that I'm showing on the screen. This is how we computed for each of the indicators and each of the variables that each city, each municipality submits. It went through this process. Up to now, it's the same. It's only the weights that have changed. Originally, the weights were equal, three pillars, 33.3% per pillar. But now that there are five pillars, so it's now divided into five, so 20. Each pillar is 20. Okay. So I went back to all of my old presentation of CMCI that we did. So this is just to show you how the process of improvement happened over time. So the first one, as Ofi said, in 2013, when my I grade was still better at that time. What I did with just a student assistant, we worked together on the 285 municipalities and cities that submitted in 2013. I was doing it only in Excel file, very simple. Only a few cities and municipalities that submitted there, and you will see even their completion rate. They could not complete those lists that were given them. Right? At first, there were only 52%, and you see over time they learn, they improve, they were able to collect the data, they understand how it is done. So eventually, as of the last 3 years, the cities at least will have more than 90% completion rates. Right? So this is how it improved over time. Okay. Okay, I'll just skip this. So in 2016, there was another project that came in, and Bill and the rest of the NCC and RCCs at that time, we were still reeling from the impact of Yolanda at that time. So we started to work on coming up with another pillar, which we think is very important, which is resiliency. So at that time, another project came into the picture, another project of USAID, which is the Surge project. They invested in trying to come up with this fourth pillar called resiliency. So in that, the addition of that new pillar, again, was a very difficult process. Yes, we have to go through all of it again. So these are the 10 indicators that were added. So until 2017, and later we'll show you from the slides of Bill, it has almost completed all the cities in 2017. In 2021, in the middle of the pandemic, DTI asked me as an important addition to the pillar is the pillar of innovation, since it seems to be lacking in that context, considering that we have already entered the AI age, basically. So innovation. In fact, just before coming here for my sabbatical, there was an attempt again to ask for another pillar to be added, creativity. But it's very challenging now. It will dilute the different elements. So it's really up to the policymakers to decide how it's going to go. But as of the moment, this is how it looks like. The framework looks like this. So there are many benefits to this. The private sector can benefit, the public sector, policy making, investments, and the academe. Just one story. In 2019, I was helping the DOH come up with a health labor market analysis. They don't know how many private clinics do we have, and how many private practitioners in healthcare do we have. And I said, you don't have that data? The CMCI has that. And they were surprised to find out that there are really a lot of information there that can be useful for health policy making. At the same time, for the private sector, if you want to come up with a new clinic there, that's the data is already telling you that this is saturated with clinics, right? So that's one. I'm currently writing a paper on relating CMCI to net zero cities, and even net zero cities do not have specific measurements at the moment, but the CMCI in itself can already capture certain elements of a net zero city. So for example, I'm showing the screen. These are indicators in the CMCI that can be used to show that a city is approaching net zero or has net zero probabilities. So those are things that can be done with the CMCI data. Okay, so yeah, I think I'll stop here and just say that it's really important to have evidence-based policy making. We need benchmarks, and it helps us identify strengths and areas for improvement. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope this gives you an idea of how the CMCI has been very useful in policy making and also for private investments. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvin. Great background and more context to the CMCI. And I think one of the pieces of data that some of you may appreciate is that in the beginning, we had difficulty collecting data from the cities themselves because they did not, no one bothered to ask them for the data to begin with. And no one ever thought of keeping the data in an organized fashion. So you can see in the early days, they could only barely make 50% of the data completion on the list. And today they're routinely hitting over 90% of the data. And today, it's 100% of cities and municipalities submitting data every year into the data set. So that's thanks to the groundbreaking work of Dr. Alvin Ang and Ofelia Templo in helping design the CMCI. Now for our third speaker, we're going to jump to a mayor who is not only a contributor to the CMCI, because as a mayor, you are a contributor of data, but you are also a consumer of data if you are a city or municipal mayor. And our third speaker is Mayor Ferdinand Ferdy Estrella, the visionary leader of Baliwag City in Bulacan, and one of the most awarded mayors in the Philippines. Under his leadership, Baliwag rose from 960th in the Competitiveness Index in 2016 to becoming the back-to-back second most competitive municipality in 2021 and 2022. So in a matter of 5 or 6 years, using the data he analyzed from CMCI, he used that to improve his city into that rank. His innovative e-governance programs have also made Baliwag a 4-time champion in digital governance awards, while earning accolades like the Seal of Good Local Governance and the Manila Bayani Award Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, he cannot join us in person today, so he has sent his video explaining how he brought Baliwag from 960th up to 2nd using the CMCI data. So let's please welcome on screen Mayor Ferdinand Estrella of Baliwag City in Bulacan.
Magandang araw po sa lahat. Ako po si Mayor Ferdy Estrella mula sa Baliwag City. Isang karangalan po sa akin na maimbitahan as one of the speakers para sa gawaing ito. Liveable Cities Lab, Data and the City with a Theme, using data to create competitive cities. Maiksing pagpapakilala lang po para sa aming minamahal na Baliwag. Marahil familiar kayo sa Baliwag dahil narinig na niyo ito bilang brand ng provincial bus na bumabiyahe sa EDSA. Gayun din ang masarap na brand ng lechong manok na maraming branches sa buong bansa. Pero bago pa maging commercial brand ng Baliwag, isa po kaming bayan, isang first-class municipality sa lalawigan ng Bulacan, bago kami maging ika-148 na lungsod sa Pilipinas noong December 17, 2022. Kami nga ang ika-4 na lungsod sa lalawigan ng Bulacan. Kami ay binubuo ng 27 barangays, may urban at rural classifications, at may kabuuang lupang sakop na 4,505 hectares, kung saan hindi pa baba sa 60% ay agricultural land pa rin. Ang Baliwag ay may populasyon na 175,897, habang ang number of households ay naitala sa 44,842. Noon pa man, ang Baliwag ay tinaguri ang sentro ng kalakal at komersyo sa hilagang bahagi ng Bulacan. Sa mga negosyong bumubuhay sa aming ekonomiya, may tuturing na major local industries ang pagsasaka, paghahayupan, at paggawa ng furniture, garments, processed foods, at pyrotechnics. Ang Baliwag din ang kinikilalang third highest rice producer sa buong lalawigan ng Bulacan. Sa Philippine Development Plan, ang Baliwag ay isa sa key expansion areas ng Mega Manila at isa ring regional center. Kung i-google ninyo ang Baliwag, kilala kami bilang may pinakamahabang Lenten procession sa buong Pilipinas. Nasa 150 karosas po ang lumalahok kada taon. Kilala rin ang Baliwag Buntalhat Weaving, kung kaya ang aming festival tuwing Mayo ay halaw sa produktong ito. Now, let me share to everyone our journey, efforts, and best practices to achieve the major leap in the competitiveness ranking. To inspire everyone, let me share that when I assumed office in 2016, kami ay nasa laylayan ng CMCI. Baliwag is placed 960th in the CMCI ranking out of then 1,490 municipalities in 2016. But from 2017 to 2023, sa pagkakapit-bisig sa serbisyong may malasakit, Baliwag has become one of the top-performing municipalities in the country. Unang taon sa aking unang termino, we are invited sa CMCI awarding sa PICC. Pero audience at tagapalakpak lang po kami that time. Then, I got curious. Paano ba maging awardee dito? The following day, I consulted my team. We reviewed the performance indicators. 4 pa lang dati. These include government efficiency, economic dynamism, infrastructure, and resiliency. Noong nakita ko ang requirements, sabi ko sa kanila, bibilangin lang pala, bakit hindi bilangin lahat ng kailangang bilangin? At i-comply ang mga kailangang i-comply, like approval of annual or term-based plans, codes, and accreditation of groups. To make the long story short, we did gathering of quantitative data, then aligned our targets and efforts to the CMCI requirements. We make sure na meron kaming fully functional business one-stop shop, EBPLS, e-payment system, LGU official website, and investment promotion unit. We updated all codes and plans such as CDP, DRRMP, CLUP, ICT plan, and LIIC. Lahat naman kasi nang nire-require sa CMCI geared towards promoting excellence, not just good governance, collaboration and transparency, as well as accuracy and security of information. Further, we intensified our data gathering through strengthened network with the private sector and NGOs, and comprehensive research to get the latest stats. At dito nga po nagsimula ang aming winning journey sa CMCI. In 2017, Baliwag was recognized as 3rd most improved municipality for the 1st and 2nd class municipality category, plus these recognitions. In 2018, Baliwag joined the top 10 and was hailed 9th most competitive municipality in the country, plus these recognitions. In 2019, Baliwag achieved a major milestone by becoming 3rd most competitive municipality in the entire country, plus these recognitions. In 2020, Baliwag went back-to-back 3rd most competitive municipality, and again, these recognitions. In 2021, despite the pandemic, Baliwag rose to 2nd most competitive municipality, plus these recognitions in 4 pillars. In 2022, Baliwag maintained its upper ranking as 2nd most competitive municipality. And in 2023, Baliwag slid a notch lower but still made it as the 3rd most competitive municipality in the country. So how did we arrive at the aforementioned consecutive victories? The answer is plain and simple. We assigned a focal person for CMCI for consolidation and analysis. Further, we pulled a CMCI team who will perform the data gathering so that we can supply the data requirements for all the performance indicators. Ang susi po talaga ay masusing pagbibilang at pagkalap ng datos if the data are not readily available. Strategically, for Baliwag, since 2016, we already pushed for e-governance to make way for innovations, digitalizations, automation, online services, streamlined processes, and reliable database management. At dahil may information system kami gaya ng EBPLS, some of our data can be generated automatically through this in-house system like gross sales, total capitalization, etc. It also helped that our concerned offices have organized filing system and documentation for easy retrieval. In our case, we have an archive and records office for central filing and retrieval because these processes will become material as we have to make sure that our objective evidence are on standby when CMCI proponents perform the actual validation. Ang CMCI team namin ay mostly department heads and heads of office. We also follow an internal calendar from data gathering, consolidation, up to the submission of the CMCI local data capture sheet. When we gathered the data in 2017, ito ang naging official baseline data namin. So every year, nag-update na lang ang mga heads ng data nila. Kami sa Baliwag, when we had a taste of our very first CMCI award in 2017, the experience propelled us to do better and better until we were able to build a habit and make the core process of data gathering manageable. Kung paano po ma-improve ang data to ensure the LGU's competitiveness is totally a different topic. Ibang usapan na kung paano mapapataas ang gross receipt, ang bilang ng mga business entities, infra facilities, and the like. For Baliwag, very indispensable ang CMCI data, and truly, we were able to maximize them to our advantage. In terms of good local governance and economic growth, the competitiveness ranking of Baliwag brought positive implications for our internal and external stakeholders. For the LGU officials and employees, the consistent high ranking boosted the morale of the workforce, as our fellow LGUs in Bulacan have accorded high regards for us. Pag nakita po kami sa mga meetings sa Liga o kaya sa mga patawag ng DILG or provincial government, lagi kaming nako-commend ng mga higher officials at laging naimbitahan to share our best practices gaya na lang nito. The CMCI data became a reliable baseline for our data-driven governance, which we used as input when we plan for construction of relevant infrastructure and prioritization in the procurement of the capital outlay. Ginagamit din ito as basis in policy interventions like pursuing MOA and MOU, approval of plans, codes, etc. We were able to point out gaps in our programs and services, like accreditation of tourism-related enterprises, the need for patents and trademarks, the requirements sa CMCI. So, through our Tourism Office and Economic Enterprise Office, we include relevant interventions to bridge the gaps. At dahil readily available ang CMCI data ng Baliwag, it became easy for us to tap resources from public and private partners, particularly when responding and managing disasters and calamities. Dahil dito, we opened our doors for partnerships and collaborations by pursuing MOUs and MOAs para sa sharing of resources. Moreover, nakatulong din ito para ma-enhance ang knowledge and skills ng mga staffs from the expertise of our partners. Naging preferred LGU din kami ng DILG, DTI, and DNR na in-endorse kami sa mga LGUs, colleges, and universities from Luzon to Mindanao for benchmarking and research work. Kaya marami pong dumadayo sa Baliwag to learn from us. Para sa aming constituents, naging source of pride nila ang competitiveness ranking ng Baliwag. Kasi hindi lang ito basta prestigious recognition. Nakita at ramdaman talaga nila ang visibility at pag-improve ng quality ng physical indicators, especially the ones related sa infra, economic, and resiliency. Para sa potential investors, they are also keen on Baliwag's competitiveness ranking. Kaya pag may pumunta sa amin at nagtanong about it, we take pride saying we are among the top performing LGUs in the country. As a result, this information gives them a favorable impression that Baliwag is a viable city to jumpstart or expand their business ventures. Nagamit din namin ang competitiveness ranking as a leverage when we lobbied for our cityhood. From 2021 to 2022, the legislators were convinced that Baliwag is indeed ready to join the League of Progressive Component Cities in the country. In 2024, we officially joined the CMCI City category. Ibang level ang City League. Dahil being the second youngest city, many older and bigger component cities are miles ahead than us. Hindi man kami pasok pa sa top 10, but our primary goal is to continuously comply and improve our data entries in the CMCI index. Nonetheless, for every award and recognition that we receive in Baliwag, we always attribute our achievements to the crucial role that the leadership and management played. They are the ones who are working the extra mile to push for a competitive environment. Kaya naman in Baliwag, we also give incentives to further inspire and motivate the team behind an achievement. It could be a monetary, promotion, or trip abroad. In closing, I would like to inspire every LGU represented here. Kung kinaya po ng Baliwag na magkaroon ng 180-degree turn sa competitiveness ranking, siguradong kakayanin rin ng LGUs ninyo. Basta maging focused and strategic lang in data gathering and in aligning the LGU performance with the CMCI index. Having said that, maraming salamat Liveable Cities Philippines, led by Chairman Sir Guillermo M, for the opportunity to share our success story. Magandang araw po sa lahat.
Wow. So just try to imagine how many more mayors are trying to do what Mayor Estrella is doing. And what the power of data has given him in his municipality and now city, how it is how he sees it as important, and more importantly, how he stresses that it is data-driven governance that is powering the city of Baliwag. I have no doubt that in a few years, he will rise up the ranks again among component cities. As he said, he is not yet in the top 10, but I would not bet against him, knowing what he's done to jump up from 960 to number 2 among municipalities. So thank you for that very inspirational video message, Mayor. Now for our last speaker, we're going to welcome Abel Capco, Senior Manager for Customer Intelligence, Insights Business Partners at Globe Telecom, where he leads customer intelligence initiatives to drive data-driven decision-making. With over 10 years of experience in market analytics and research, he has worked across industries like telecommunications and insurance, spearheading projects such as real-time feedback systems and competitive benchmarking. Today, he will share insights on how data drives decisions in private sector growth and investment, drawing from his expertise in transforming data into strategic business solutions. Please join me in welcoming Abel.
Thank you, Bill. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me first check if the clicker is working. It is working. So we are first and foremost thankful for having Globe as a partner of Liveable Cities. So I was tasked to share how Globe as a private entity actually uses data to come up with our day-to-day, not only day-to-day, but even strategic decisions. And I actually come from the customer intelligence group of Globe. It's part of the bigger enterprise data and strategic services, which actually acts as a shepherd to the organization. So our new deputy CEO considers us as the shepherd of the organization, much like how Baliwag used CMCI data to actually direct where the city is going. So we function in the same way in Globe. So we guide the different business units on the tactical and strategic decisions that they will make. But before I go to the meat of the discussion this afternoon, I first would like to give a short introduction about Globe, because you may know Globe as this telco giant that carries brands like TM and Globe Prepaid and Globe Postpaid. So maybe some of you here are subscribers of Globe. But Globe is not just a telco company. We actually see ourselves as a hyper-focused digital company with major interests in venture capital and venture building through Kickstart Ventures and 917 Ventures. We also have stakes in shared services through Astecom. We have stakes even in terms of B2B development. We help businesses in their digital transformation. Even cities, we partner with cities in their digital transformation journeys and their digital solution needs through Yondu, Third Pillar, all these. We also have subsidiaries like Brave Connective that helps businesses in their advertising, or Enquiro when it comes to their data. So you can imagine the breadth of involvement that Globe has in different industries. And all of these actually exist to serve our purpose of uplifting the lives of every Filipino. We are actually guided by that purpose. And so Globe continues to search for opportunities to help uplift the lives of Filipinos. Now, how do we determine the best ways to uplift the lives of Filipinos? The short answer is that first and foremost, we have to understand Filipinos. You have to understand them. In order for us to determine the best ways to uplift the lives of Filipinos, we first need to understand who they are, what they need, all 116 million of us, based on the different estimates that you'll find online. And imagine that the best way to understand the Filipinos is for us to really look at the data available about Filipinos. So, back in the 1990s, based on certain estimates, the amount of data generated in the world on a daily basis was only about 1 terabyte. Some of us more aware than others how much data was generated during that time. I see some students here who may not even be born yet in the 1990s. But imagine that today, this has exploded to about 330 exabytes. That's with 18 zeros in 2023. What are we going to do with that amount of data? And how does a company like Globe actually make the most out of these data points that are available to us? The next slide shows data triangulation. Basically, what I want to say is just that Globe uses multiple metrics from different sources gathered through different methodologies to guide our decisions. So we collect a lot of data. I'm going to show you a few examples later on, but we collect a lot of data. Being a telco, we have a lot of data points available to us, and we actually triangulate this with different data points from different sources through different methodologies to come up with the best decisions. Because we have to understand that the consumer is not just a consumer, but a whole human being. We actually advocate for understanding the consumer as a whole human being. And therefore, by understanding the consumer as a whole human being, we can have a human-centered decision-making approach. Sometimes we fall into the trap of looking at the consumer as a mere GP subscriber or a TM subscriber, when in fact, that person has a lot of complexities within him that will factor into the decisions that he or she makes on a daily basis. Those are the things that we want to capture through different data points to better guide our decision making as well as a company. So what's a sample data that we collect? Like any other company, and actually some of the basis of CMCI come from surveys, primary data. So I come from the customer intelligence team. Many of the things that we do involve surveys, your usual qualitative and quantitative methods of gathering data. So through various research methodologies, we actually determine the profile, the needs, the pain points, and preferences of our customers. So for example, we have this big tracking study that collects data continuously throughout the entire country so that we can monitor the profile of our subscribers. So by profile, I mean determining the demographics of our subscribers and that of competitors. We want to know their age, their gender, where are they located. And that way, we immediately gain insight as to the type of programs that we can launch for our subscribers. So even at the city level, we would know where Globe is strong, where Globe is weak, and that influences the kind of programs that you develop, the nuanced approach that you will have for the different cities. So for example, we would know, for example, if TM is actually strong among the youth, which is the target market of the brand, or if Globe Postpaid is relegated as a brand for the oldies, for example. So what can we do if you want to transform the way we engage, the way we engage with our target market? So these things, knowing these things actually yield insights that help us with our day-to-day decision making. So their needs, for example, we look at the needs of people through surveys, like how many GBs or gigabytes does a normal person consume on a daily basis? How many gigabytes does a person need? What sort of apps are being used by young people these days, by students these days, by young professionals? So all these things factor even in our decisions when it comes to portfolio. So you can imagine that by gathering data, interpreting it and analyzing the data that we have, we can actually come up with better decisions that will be more relevant to our target respondents. So knowing this will allow us to adjust our messaging, our marketing mix. Maybe you're not aware of this, but because of data points like this, we actually have promos that are only available in certain cities. So some promos are only available, for example, in a certain city in Visayas because of competitor aggression in these cities. And we won't know these things if we don't collect data and analyze it. Now, if I will draw a parallel for our cities, for example, I think knowing the demographics of a city's citizens will immediately give ideas about things to be prioritized. I mean, knowing their pain points and preferences could actually give us ideas about programs and initiatives that will benefit the city's residents. So apart from primary data collected through surveys and other research methodologies, we also watch our network performance. So there are actually matrices related to network performance, like network availability, consistency, LTE congestion, latency, all these things. Of course, we can't discuss the technicalities today, but suffice it to say that there are teams in Globe that look at network performance, imagine at the town level. So they meet on a weekly basis to discuss network performance at the town level to inform our site builds. So where will it be most efficient for us to build a new cell site? Are we going for more coverage? Or are we going to ease up the congestion in certain areas? So all these decisions are guided by data so that we can deliver our desired customer experience. So apart from this, we also look at behavioral data. Of course, I won't be able to discuss all the data points that Globe considers in the decisions that we make, but I'm here to give you a few examples. So we also analyze behavioral data, for example, like how much gig does a particular person, this one is on a personal level already, on a user level, consume on a particular day. At what time of the day is he consuming these gigs? Which apps are they using and where are they when they are using these apps? We know these things and we capitalize on them by creating offers that are actually appropriate for a particular cohort. So for example, I won't ask now who among you are Globe subscribers, but if you happen to be a Globe subscriber and if you have the Globe One app installed on your phones, you can look at buy promo or buy load, and then you'll see that just for you section there. That's actually a product of your usage being analyzed. And so we're able to give a recommendation on the next best offer and the next best action. We also have some geo-targeted offers. Like for example, we can drop a pin in Baguio and everyone in Baguio receives this SMS and receives this special promo. So those are the things that we do to capitalize on the data that's available to us. For example, we also have Only Midnight. So Only Midnight leverages on the fact that network congestion is very low after midnight. But some people, I think some of us, are awake after midnight and would like to use data after midnight. So we are able to offer only gigs at a time when the network is not congested. And how can we come up with ideas like this except we look at data? All right, so 5 minutes more. Because of data's guidance, Globe was actually able to secure market leadership in mobile connectivity since Q3 2026. From being a challenger many years ago, we up to this day, we are still the mobile connectivity leader in the Philippines. That's thanks to some of the subscribers who are here today. But beyond this, Globe actually aspires to create a globe of good. So we are very conscious about sustainability. The figure on the left-hand side of the slide is actually Globe Sustainability Framework that looks at not only our business yields, but we look at the environment, we look at governance, and we even look at our impact to society or the social impact by equipping Filipinos to be digital first. Remember, I told you earlier that Globe is a digital first company. So GCash, for example, was an initiative under the 917 Ventures. And imagine that right now, GCash has 93 million subscribers and it's interwoven into the fabric of modern living somehow, right? To many of us. So those are the things that Globe is actually involved in. Maybe as a final piece for everyone, at Globe, we actually aspire to see, our vision as a company is actually very big. We want to see a Philippines where families' dreams come true, businesses flourish, and the nation is admired. Our CEO, Ernest Koo, will always tell us to look for a problem that is big enough, that will impact the lives of people, and a problem that is solvable by digital technology. So because we want to harness the power of digital technology to uplift the lives of Filipinos. Again, I go back to my point earlier. It all starts by knowing your customers, by knowing the Filipino. And knowing the customers in their context allows us to discover more opportunities to uplift their lives. I'll end with this. One of the interesting projects that we have in my team is actually a territory immersion. So we visit cities across the country. In 2024 alone, we visited some 30 cities And it's different when you understand people and consumers in their context, because it will open new doors of opportunities in order to help them be uplifted and realize Globe's purpose. So we want to be able to use digital solutions to foster inclusive growth and stronger social cohesion amidst widening inequalities, because we believe that if we are to grow as a country, it has to be growing with everyone, and that is inclusive growth. I have here some examples of cities who use technology to actually improve their levels of development and even social cohesion. So there's this Decidim in Barcelona for citizen participation. In QC, there is Q Citizen, which democratizes access. Mayor Joy was one of her speakers in one of her summits last year. So you use this ID to access social services and the likes. QC also has this program, I Rise Up, which ensures safety. So imagine being able to collect data points in all these areas, and when you're able to analyze which areas are most at risk, maybe it can influence infrastructure development, where to put more streetlights, where to deploy more policemen. So all these things. This is also an interesting case study. You can read it up online of how a city in Southern America was able to transform through technology and social innovation. And of course, Singapore, a city that is actually geared towards becoming a very sustainable, smart city in the future. And I think you'll know stories about Singapore. Finally, maybe I just want to leave this message with everyone that it all starts with data, driving human-centered leadership and decisions, helping to foster social cohesion and inclusive development to build a sustainable future for our cities. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Abel. Okay, let me invite Abel. I'll invite you back up here together with Ofelia Templo to join us up front to answer some questions. Can we get Alvin still online? Ivana, would you like to join us up here as well? And we'll begin our open forum. So for those of you who've watched the lab before, you know how this works. We can take the questions here from on-site at AIM. All you have to do is speak loudly, because the microphones overhead will pick up the audio, and we'll be able to hear your question. We're also going to be taking questions from online. So for those of you on Zoom or Facebook, please feel free to put in the questions and we will receive it up front here. And so let's open it up to questions. Would anyone like to be the first? No brave souls today. Okay, Ivana's gonna be the first then. Ivana, go ahead.
Well, Ophie, I actually asked you already earlier, because our work, I'm Ivana from Coca-Cola, and our work, my team's work in particular in Coca-Cola is really focused on waste management. And so I asked you earlier, when you look at the CMCI indicators, where is waste management is waste management part of the indicators? Is it known to the cities and the municipalities that it is there? And again, this coming from the perspective of we want local governments to drive more collection and recycling at the local level.
Well, as I answered you, under the resiliency pillar, there's an
an indicator there on sanitary systems. But the details of that, I would ask Alvin to answer on what are the specific indicators under sanitary system. Yung mga waste management doon.
Did you hear that, Alvin?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Just a minute. I'm looking at I remember there is one on that. Right. Yeah, it's not really waste management. We have an indicator, general indicator called sanitary system, wherein part of that, the details of that is that there is a collection, if they have landfills, that's I remember, if they have landfills, or I think that's the only thing I remember, but I can go through the data sets. It's quite extensive, so there is data on that, but not on how many trucks are coming. But we are asking them, where are they depositing the trash they collected?
Yeah. So I let me add to that, Alvin and Ofi. In the past, that was the question. That was the basic indicator we looked at, because that's a very visible indicator, whether you have sanitary landfill or not, and many cities don't, right? So they dump in another neighboring city or LGU. But so long as they have access to sanitary landfill was the question. But I think more relevant today is how much of our waste is being recycled. Okay, I think that is not regularly measured by many cities. There's some who do, who measure it. I can think of two examples. One is Marikina, when we had Mayor Marcy Isidoro speak at a waste management, waste recycling session of the Liveable Cities Lab. He talked about the way they recycle both organic and inorganic, and what they do to convert them, including recycling used cooking oil. So he actually had a system where they collected once a week used cooking oil in Marikina. Lately, Baguio City has embarked on a major recycling effort with Mayor Benji Magalong, because I suspect they're running out of landfill. So that's why they were quite concerned and figuring out what can they do to promote a circular economy more. So I think that's a metric that we need to introduce in a systematic way among more cities, how to capture and reuse their waste. So in a future edition of CMCI, that's something that we need to be asking Ofi. Okay, let me pass this next question to Ofi. What's the importance of regularly updated local development and competitiveness data to long-term local and national progress? Why should we keep doing it?
I'm really a statistician, so I'm very biased with data and data gathering. So, yes, why should we gather the CMCI? I would look at CMCI as an example for long-term development. Because when you look at the economic development plan, both at the national and local, the city, for example, development plan, you talk about a lot of goals. Yeah. And kasi when the government talks about local development plan, there's a long-term development plan, which is now the difference between the short and medium and the long term is the sustainability issue. Kasi most often the data that you generate for short term are short-term data that would feed into your long-term, diba? And if you don't collect the short-term data, you don't have an idea of how your economy has been progressing. For you to be able to do
planning for the long term. For example, what's a good example of this? No, if you are collecting data on, let's say, inflation, or in the case of local governments, your sources of growth, if you look at the data, would be the CMCI data. It has a bias for bigness, so Quezon City has always been number one. But you would have data on other cities that are also progressing. So if you have data that tells you that, hey, Iloilo City has actually been growing at a much faster rate than Manila, in the long run, if I were the government, I would now look at how, because this performance of the cities impacted growth, how can I support Iloilo City? How can I support, for example, Cagayan de Oro City? During my time, I only knew about Manila and Quezon City as contributory to the GNP and GDP. These cities were, the performance of the cities were nowhere to be found during my time until CMCI. So I became aware that, hey, you should not only look at the policies of NCR, you should also look at why, for example, firms are locating your IT firms are locating in Iloilo and not in other cities. So the data that you are able to generate on the long run, the time trend, would inform you of how to plan the Philippines in general. Kasi the parts make up the whole, diba? Hindi mo pa pwede isang time zone, trend lang, isang year lang ang titignan mo. You have to look at the time trend, and data would provide that. So that's my long answer to the question.
Thanks, Sophie. Abel, I have a question here. How has data-driven decision-making made your projects and partnerships more effective and efficient? You cited one example here. You had Quezon City with the Q Citizens card. I know you have a Makati card. You talked about iRise Up. So how has all that data made those partnerships effective and efficient? Any other examples outside of Quezon City and Makati?
Actually, in terms of actual partnership with cities, I'm not sure if we have any other partnership. Most of the services that we provide to cities are actually in terms of connectivity. So if I'll actually circle back to CMCI, that's part of the requirements under innovation. But the question was about how our partnerships. Sorry, come again.
Yeah, how the partnerships are made more effective and efficient through data, because of data.
Right. So I could talk more about our partnerships with other entities. So we look at, for example, so Globe has partners in terms of streaming, Netflix, all these stuff. So one of the things that we look at would be, number one, if we partner with these particular companies, is there, I'll talk about a very specific example. An example would be Go Plus 99. It's a promo of Globe, but it's beyond telco because it offers a lot of freebies. So you get your Lazada voucher, all these things. It's made more efficient because, number one, when you offer all these freebies, which freebies are actually being pulled or being redeemed by your customer base? By knowing that, you'll actually be able to, number one, see which partners are actually adding value to the brand. So it's inefficient in a way because you don't have to maintain a lot of partners. Maybe you just have to maintain the important ones that are actually adding to the brand. In terms of partnership with cities, I think if you have the data and you really see what's adding value to your citizens, so it's being patronized by citizens in terms of the kind of services that we provide, then it can help us streamline processes and thereby become more efficient.
Earlier, you mentioned something about dropping a pin and sending a message to a group within that city or community. So theoretically, in the event of, let's say, an emergency such as a typhoon coming up, you could drop a pin on the city that could be hit by typhoon and you could issue a warning. That's possible?
Theoretically, that's possible. Yeah.
Because right now, the warnings we're getting, NDRMC, but that seems to be nationwide, regardless of whether we're going to be hit by a storm or not, right? Shouldn't it be a little more sort of scientific in the approach and more granular in saying that, a specific set of provinces is going to be affected, not the entire country. I mean, no sense in causing panic.
Theoretically, that's possible, I think.
Go ahead, Ofi.
Can I comment on that question? If I were Globe and if I were competitor ninyo, smart, no? I would look at the CMCI data. The first data that I would look at would be the number of establishments in a locality. And I would compare it with your subscribers. Diba? And you can even disaggregate it into small, medium, and large. How? Because there is in the data this capitalization of new establishments. And capitalization is a proxy for investments. Diba? So you will be able to see, in fact, the reason why DTI is able to say that 98% of our establishments belong to the SME sector, small and medium, because the CMCI data will be able to do that. Because they have data on investments, diba? Capitalization, classify mo lang. And in one of my studies, I did gender analysis of, female-headed households of establishments in a certain locality. And again, because most of the establishments are SMEs, so mas maraming SME, maraming female-headed households na SMEs. So if I were, not that I'm telling you what to do, but you can easily, just by the numbers without looking at the privacy data, yung actual firms, diba? Makikita mo na doon na, you can classify your firms into small, large, and medium. Kung nakita mo sa isang locality, yung large ko ay, 100 establishments. Then, how many large firms are subscribed to you?
Yeah.
Then you can actually, do your marketing in that case.
Yeah. That can actually factor in, only determine the market share of Globe and particular cities at that granular level. Well, tell the team.
Bill, I'll respond to your first question, Dorabel, on how insight would inform programs to improve efficiency. And I'll take a step back. I think the way that we do our programs with the local governments, when we do our waste management programs with them, we go into full mode feasibility studies to first check is there interest, number one, from the community level, and at what level is it? Is it at the local government level, barangay level? Are there potential partners there? Because we want to be able to collect PET. Is there volume of PET there? And that's the tricky part. I know, Bill, last time you asked me what's the volume of PET. That's the kind of data that we need, and we don't necessarily have. So we do get estimates from junk shops and local recyclers, and that's what we end up depending on. And then from there, once the program is already in place, we continue to collect data that allows us to be agile and see, do we need to pivot our program? For example, if we're doing a training program, capacity building for barangay waste managers, do we need to pivot it and focus on something else, like collection for recycling or upcycling? So I think the collection of data needs to be continuous at the start, at the beginning, and throughout the program to allow us to be agile.
Okay, thanks. Is Dr. Ang still on, Alvin? Alvin, you still there? Okay, Alvin.
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay,
Yeah.
question, Alvin, before you go. I know that you got to run to a class somewhere, but just a question. In the CMCI, what are the indicators that have significant weights? Should LGUs focus on the gaps found or on the indicators that have the most weight?
All right. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah. Thank you for the question. Actually, as I mentioned earlier, the CMCI, the pillars, they have all equal weights. Each indicator has an equal weight, so that we don't put an importance of one over the other. So that means that if you miss on one, you miss a point on that, right? So what is important now is that if you are lacking or you're lagging compared to other municipalities or cities in that particular pillar, then you can just improve on it without trying to highlight or to move to that indicator which you thought has a higher weight than the others. So it's all equal, so that you all give equal focus on all of them.
Thanks, Alvin. I'll add to that in the philosophy why the equal weights, because our feeling was if you want to be a competitive city, you've got to be good at least across many fronts. You cannot be excellent in one front and absolutely the worst performer on another. You had to be good across the board. So that's the reason why we had equal weights, so no one would start chasing the heavier weights. Okay, I see a question up here. Yep, one here, then I saw another there. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
I'm James Francis Villanueva from the city of San Fernando, Pampanga. I'm the ICT officer. So two things.
Sure.
First, to support the question earlier regarding the success stories with Yes. All right. With between Globe and the LGUs. Actually, the city of San Fernando is one of the beneficiaries of the GCash programs that they are launching through to the LGU. So the data we received was very helpful for us to identify which number one is the city ready for online transactions? And number two, what are the challenges posed by online transactions? So through the data that we have gathered, although it's not really that extensive, but through the limited data that we gathered, we saw the demand for online transactions, and one of the bigger companies out there is GCash, right? So after that, we were able to implement the Paleng QR. So that's in partnership with BSP. And one of the challenges posted there was connectivity, the need for connectivity. So given that there's a demand for that, we ensured that when we were implementing our free Wi-Fi projects across the city, the markets and other public areas which we targeted and identified are fitted with free Wi-Fi access. So that's one of the success stories that we were able to. And that's one of the success stories that we have a partnership with Globe, Gcash/Globe, of course. And for my question is, it's really commendable for the city of Baliwag to really prioritize CMCI. So by creating this dedicated team, by identifying focal persons, it's really nice that they have that. But coming from the LGU, it's really hard for all LGUs to implement the same thing for all indicators and metrics, because you have SGLG, you have Gawad Kalasag, you have so many CMCI, etc. So most LGUs, I noticed that they're focusing on those awards that will benefit them the most. CMCI, although the acknowledgement is really, really nice, it does not give funding as compared to SGLG. Because the DILG will give the winning qualifying cities the SGLG fund. It's a grant for you to use to improve on your services. So my question now is there any move to consolidate all of these metrics so that it will be a more uniform approach and practical approach? Because if we're going to focus on all awards and metrics, then it will be very tedious. And instead of focusing on the actual needs of the people, you'll be focusing on the awards and the data that you are trying, okay, we have to improve this and that. But the problem is, how can you improve if you're just focused on the data itself and not really the cascading of the services? One example is in our city, San Fernando recently garnered the Gawad Kalasag Beyond Compliance Award. Beyond Compliant Award. So that's the highest level of recognition for the Gawad Kalasag. However, in the 2024 CMCI, although the city of San Fernando placed relatively good for its overall performance and high for innovation, top 5 actually, for resilience, it's relatively low. So it makes you ask, it makes you beg the question, right? Why is our compliance, or sorry, why did we win the Gawad Kalasag, which is the actually DRRM focus award? What makes us high there but low in the CMCI resiliency parameter? So that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, no, those are excellent questions. Ofi, would you like to start first?
I will just answer one part of the question, which is yung relationship between the SGLG and the CMCI. I remember in 2014 or 2013, the ILG actually included some of the CMCI indicators in the SGLG. In fact, that's the reason why a number of LGUs actually strive to gather the data for CMCI. Kasi kakabit na yung, I just don't recall exactly which indicators included. But that's the first attempt. But I'm not quite familiar with the other awards. Kasi baka si Alvin or you can answer.
Yeah. Alvin, any response to that question also? About
Actually,
consolidating the awards.
Yeah, some of the awards, some of it like Office correct, the DILG's Seal of Good Local Governance, they got one or two of indicators that we had in the CMCI. I think one of them is the social protection, and if I'm not mistaken, because they asked about it, because I think it's part of the SGLG. So they at least two, but I can't remember the other one. Yeah, there is that that in fact during that DILG DTI meeting at that time, they said that if you compile this, you have already both points for both awards. But the rest, I guess, based on the observation, because the metrics of the CMCI is maybe little different from the Kalasag Awards, right? In that, I mean, it's the CMCI is very specific in lining up all the resiliency related indicators. So it's not just a particular indicator, but there are 10, but within that 10 there are sub indicators. So if I can check my data, it's about 25 or 30 sub indicators connected to that resiliency indicator. So mahirap magtayo ng bangko dito with Ofi and Bill, but I guess this has been done in a very complicated manner that each indicator was fought for in the regions. In fact, the resiliency one was one of the most difficult one, Bill, if you remember, because this was in Bohol when we were doing this. Every region has its own uniqueness that they say this is what our region is. So we cannot comply with that requirement, but we're trying to standardize things in the CMCI. So I guess in that sense, mas detalyado yung sa CMCI, but I don't know the details of the Kalasag Award. So I guess nakuha din ng CMCI portion of it, particularly yung DRRM, the CDP, etc. What was mentioned by the mayor earlier.
Yeah, I'm not so familiar with the details of the Kalasag, the Gawad Kalasag, but one reason why San Fernando has a different rating, you're above compliant and then you rank low in CMCI, it just could be a matter of the methodology or the year of the data when it was collected. I mean, I don't know the cutoff dates for Kalasag. I know the cutoff date for CMCI is December 31 of every year. So it could be just a matter of methodology and cutoff dates. But I think you bring up a good question about, so many awards. And that's one of our concerns, is that with so many different award giving programs, not just in government, but privately, Galing Po, for instance, which everyone goes after as well. That's a full-time job by itself, just giving us the data, right? I mean, that's really tedious. I would agree with you. And at some point in time, I know you're asking yourselves, which one do I get the better return? CMCI, you don't get a financial return, you get bragging rights and you get recognition, but you get lots of recognition, okay? And you know that one is really across the board, every LGU, there's no exception. You're really competing amongst all. In other ones, you do get a cash award, but maybe not everyone is competing. I don't know. So, but I understand the question. But the reason why we're putting up, frankly, the reason why we're putting up all these awards and submissions is because it really is in a way, it's a data collection effort in disguise. Okay, I mean, let me be honest with you. We need to flush out the data. Okay, and the way to flush out the data is we give it a rank. And to give it a rank, then you create an index so that we can rank people. But the real reward in getting the data and in ranking high is not the cash award from an agency or a trophy or a plaque. The real reward is an investor going to you and investing in your city, right? It's like you mentioned, Gcash goes to you because you feel everyone is a big market, or some establishment sets up shop or sells more within your city. So the real reward is really the business and the investment, both from your own residents and from outsiders who come in because they say, there's a market in this city or this municipality and I'd like to participate in that market. That's the real reward. So in our wildest dreams, those of us who are in data collection, myself, Ophi, Alvin, many others, in our wildest dreams, what we want is a direct plug-in into the statistical systems of government, electronically using an API. So whenever you update your data on, say, who registered a company, who filed for a building permit, who filed for occupancy permits, at any time, through our laptops, we can get access to the data and crunch the numbers across the entire country. So we would, in other words, a giant data sharing arrangement, which when we talk about mapping and AI and all these things in other countries, they're able to access all their information instantaneously because it's open data. But in the Philippines, it's not. So we're always asking for data. And that's the reason why we're having to bother the cities multiple times to actually submit data. And some of it is the same data, actually. So I can understand it's really a lot of work. But if we can connect, electronically to get the data, it would make life easier for everybody. And the information will be even more up to date than what we're getting right now, because there's a lag to what we're getting. In the way that Abel gets his data pretty well in real time, right, Abel? I mean, you can explain to us how you get your data from a city and, let's say, usage. You can tell network congestion, you can tell usage, you can tell how many terabytes or gigabytes you need per person in a place, because you're wired to do it.
Yeah, so some of the data that we're able to collect, we're able to get them real time. So we have a lot of dashboards. So we have a dashboard for network performance, which is being watched by several teams on a weekly basis. But I actually want you to know that some data points are actually collected manually still. Imagine even Globe as a private entity still has to collect some data points manually. But other matrices were able to collect almost real time through these different dashboards.
Yeah. That's great. I saw a question here. The lady over here, you had a question. Please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm Andeline, by the way, and this is my team. We're from the EI Corporation. So we are a general contractor in terms of construction and engineering. So I think my question is kind of different from the rest of the guys here because actually we're from the digital construction department, and one of the advocacies that we are promoting specifically with the hospital campaigns for better facilities management that we're trying to advocate for quite some time now is advocating the use of digital tools like building information modeling or to achieve sustainability and resilience in terms of construction. And right now, we've visited, I think, quite a number of hospitals in different cities in a span of 2 months. And we visited Hospital ng Tondo in Manila. We also visited some of the hospitals in Quezon City and also the one in the southern, which is in Cavite. And one of the challenges that they have there when it comes to the hospitals is the outdated drawings of their facilities and their buildings. So, of course, yeah, we know that very well. Some of them are very old, existing for 30 years and so. And so it's quite sad to see those kind of situations wherein if we are really talking about digitalizing everything, the use of digital tools for us to be ready in converting into the transition of having smart cities or livable cities that are sustainable and resilient enough, these particular hospitals or these particular cities are having a hard time or having some challenges adapting to these technologies and tools that are actually readily available for them to use, such as, specifically in the side of construction and facilities management, which, we are trying to promote. So I wanted to ask if you have gathered data or collected data in terms of the number of hospitals in these cities or municipalities that could answer somehow our biggest question: how many of them have an outdated facilities or buildings? And also, if they are updated, what are the factors? What are the challenges behind those things? What are, and what can we do? Because we're trying to seek partnerships as well.
Okay, thank you. Ofi, you want to handle that first, or Abel?
I will ask
Alvin?
Alvin to supplement, but I'm very happy that you are from the construction industry because in my other life, I was involved with Anti-Red Tape Authority, and we were actually, part of my work is, the LGUs would know this, the EBPLS, and we were actually trying to also promote the e-construction, meaning that you can apply your building permit and your occupancy permit online. I'm not sure if San Fernando is doing this, but there is a circular that we drafted for for ARTA, so that this will be followed nationwide. But per my last conversation with the Director General, USEC, Ernesto Perez, it seems like that circular is still being revised with the Bureau of Fire, but that was like 4 years ago. So there seems to be a problem, but I think automating, your concern is our hospitals, diba? So there is an indicator here on health infrastructure. So Alvin can probably give details on what indicators are there, but I'm not sure whether ICT part of the hospitals is an indicator that we count.
Alvin, what do you think? You're on mute, Alvin. Yes, go ahead.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Alvin. Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, right. I think the question is in regard to ICT in hospitals. Is that infra? Yeah, I think that's the CMCI has data along that line. That has to do with the infrastructure of hospitals. But most of the things we have there are really physical in nature. We don't have data on the ICT part of the hospitals. Okay. Let me just go and check that for you. So what we will find here in the details would be number of health facilities, number of beds, number of clinics, number of diagnostic centers. So specifically for ICT, unfortunately, we don't have that in our infrastructure data. In the innovation part, though, we have asked the LGUs to provide data on their ICT plans, their R&D expenditures, the R&D expenditures in their LGUs. These are all still at the introduction of technology level. So, for example, does the LGU has a website, and the expenditures of R&D are mostly based on the expenditure R&D based on the registration of companies. Do they have R&D capacities? The eBPLS software that's mentioned by Ofi is already there. The online payment system. Yeah, so yeah, that's the most that the data CMCI is able to collect in relation to infrastructure, ICT infrastructure.
Okay, let me just say that for the outdated buildings, like you mentioned, the older buildings, not just hospitals, there's no way for us to tell, short of actually examining building by building. I think that's the only way to tell the capacity on ICT. For new buildings, one of our advocacies in Livable Cities is that when buildings are built, that connectivity is built into the building. So designed and built into the building, just like electricity and just like water. Then we should have connectivity so that we just kind of plug in and start. That would be the ideal, but that's probably possible only for new buildings, no? And I think with respect to the older buildings, ideally, if the City Hall kept that data, then we could tap into that data. Then we could find out that level of ICT readiness. But right now, I think it's really a building by building approach. So maybe at the end of this meeting, you can get together with Abel and figure out using their data gathering if it's possible. But you'd have to go, it's possible, I'm sure, but you have to go building by building, I think. Yeah, that's the only way to go. Okay, I have a question here. Please go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question.
Good afternoon. I'm Susan Amoroso, the Maritime Journalists Association of the Philippines. I'm also a member of the Women in Maritime. It's an NGO with regards to, we are concerned and our advocacy is to clean the waters in the Philippines. So my question is, waste management, I think, is one of the sore points in a truly livable city. Even in Makati, I live in Makati, and waste management system in the #1 city in the Philippines, which is Makati, is very poor. They do not have waste segregation, and they all put all the garbage in the truck with the recyclable, with the compostable, with everything all in one. And I think the waters in the Philippines is also suffering because of poor waste management. I want to ask how this panel can address that.
Thank you for the question. Ivana, would you like to handle that? So Ivana comes from Coca-Cola, and they have a major project in recycling?
Thank you for your question. So, yeah, I have a sustainability programs. I have a sustainability programs at Coca-Cola Philippines, and waste management is really the #1 priority that we have. And I agree with you. It's, if you look at waste management at a systemic point of view, it does start at source. So what you mentioned, waste segregation at source, and it goes into the collection infrastructure. You mentioned the trucks, but also connecting the informal waste collectors, which is mostly our collectors here are informal collectors. Connecting the informal collectors with the formal collectors. So you have the junk shops and the bigger junk shops. And then that then goes into your recyclers. And then that would then go back, ideally, circular economy, go back into the system, or sometimes it gets exported, a majority will not be collected. And that's what goes into the rivers. Interestingly, in a Liveable Cities Lab in Palawan, where I think we had a marine representative there, he shared that when they collect waste coming from the West Philippine Sea, they actually collect waste that are not from the Philippines. They see that the brands are, we haven't really identified the brands, but they're not Philippine brands. And so they're not coming from the Philippines. That's from Palawan. So that's one of the things that we are a member of the National Plastic Action Partnership. It's chaired by the DNR and co-chaired by Coca-Cola. It's one of the baseline study is super important. We need to understand what the problem is so that we can then dissect and be laser focused on the solutions that we need to prioritize. One of the things that I would say is really capacitating local governments. There is EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility. There's the Solid Waste Management Act as well. These laws are already in place. But at the barangay level, we don't even have material recovery facilities. And that's important in the waste ecosystem because at the barangay level, again, you mentioned waste segregation at source. We need to be able to collect that so that the MRF, the material recovery facility, would then divert the waste, hopefully back into the circular economy. It's a long, but yeah, I think it's a very complex issue.
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, there are various recycling projects that are being undertaken. But one thing I must say is that the recycling, they are targeted at certain types of materials. They don't capture all. No? So I think, let's say, using the example of Coke, they collect the plastic PET bottles, and they have a system, not fully in place, but they do have a system where they're trying to send all that to a plastic recycler, which then turns them into new products. But that handles, like I say, plastic only. There's in waste, there's many other types of waste out there. So that's something I think that needs to be addressed. And the most creative solutions I've seen are Marikina and Baguio, where they've really tried to collect. And I'll tell you one thing I liked about Marikina's project for waste management. They follow a schedule, okay? So they'll pick up a certain type of waste on a certain day of the week only, okay? So that you cannot just throw out your waste any day of the week. If you throw out your waste on the wrong day of the week, it will not be picked up. And you will have a problem because it's sitting outside your house, or you have to bring it back to your house because it's going to be there for one more week. So Marikina has trained everyone to follow the schedule. Organic waste on this day, recyclable on this day, so on and so forth. Even the cooking oil, used cooking oil is picked up only once a week or something, or once every 2 weeks, so that you have to follow the schedule. The problem in waste disposal is basically a very undisciplined practice, right? People dump their waste anytime, anywhere. So what I like with Marikina is they put you on a schedule, and you will suffer if you don't follow the schedule. So I think that's one lesson that we should learn.
I'm from my family is from Pakistan, and they do the same thing in the Gupan. So I don't think they have the schedule, but they do say you need to segregate, and if you don't segregate, we're not going to collect it.
Yeah.
And it's been quite effective for them.
Yeah.
I'll answer your question directly. I think there's a need to review the indicator system now at CMCI. Because this was, in fact, it is in the works. ETR is in the process of reviewing each and every indicator. So you would understand that this was made in 2013, but the resilience kasi 2016 Between now and 2025, 24, so many things have happened, and there are projects that are major advanced now. Because the question of the problem with these indicators is really measurable, identifying each indicator and measuring them. Now, if only one or two cities, if you want that as a policy, then what is a very good indicator that you can include? And how do you collect the data? But I think your views are very important and will be taken into account when they review the indicators.
I'll just ask another question. Can a Globe, with your nuanced data collection, help in the problem of waste segregation and how to train the people, how to discipline the people in all the cities and municipalities so that they can emulate what Marikina is doing?
Yeah, actually, Globe is very big on sustainability. We're actually one of the companies that received really good, a lot of awards on sustainability. We are committed to being a net zero company. And I agree in tackling a problem as big as waste disposal. It should be a whole of the nation approach, meaning even the private sector has to contribute in whatever way possible.
Abel, I have an idea. So I know there are apps. I know people who are on a diet, right? People on a diet, they have an app that's basically a calorie counter, right? They say what they're eating and then it counts the calories, and then they know every day how many calories. So maybe you should create an app on your garbage segregation, your garbage throwing habit. How much do you generate in garbage? People might be surprised actually how much garbage they generate. So that's something that might be worth looking at, and maybe ask 917 Ventures to create one.
Possible. I think one of the things that people appreciate with GCash's recent updates on doing transactions through GCash, it tells you how much energy you save. I think it's something similar and maybe done by someone in the future.
There's one last question. I want to make sure. No, I'll make two questions, okay? The first one is, they're both important. The first one has two parts. It's from the municipality of Santa Maria. I guess Santa Maria, Bulacan, maybe, no, I'm not sure. It says here, we would like to ask about the process of data sharing, especially with private companies like Globe Telecom. Okay. And then, but there's a second part of the question, which is because they would like to assess, they say the data is important, but they would like to assess how accurate is the data? Are LGUs truly honest with the data, or are they just chasing an award? Okay, so actually, those are two separate things. I just want to stress that the data submitted in CMCI goes to CMCI, that's Department of Trade. It does not go to a private corporation, any corporation actually. it goes to Department of Trade. Now, the second question is also important. How accurate, are they telling the truth? How accurate is it? And I am going to go to our expert on that, Dr. Alvin Ang. Alvin, can you tell us how accurate the data is and what steps we take to ensure accuracy? No, his name is still there, eh? Or,
Yeah, not that I know the answer, but this is my views on this. No, let's start not with the LGU, but the source of the data. Example, business permit application, which is the source of your data on number of establishments. In that business permit form, there is a field there on number of employees. So they're always saying that, hey, you cannot rely on this data because the tendency of the applicants is to estimate or indicate, they don't indicate the right number of employees because they might be taxed or something to that effect. So the accuracy actually starts with the source of the data. It's not like the LGU. Of course, there are, when you big data sets, like the number, in Quezon City, you have 800,000 establishments. Just inputting this number, pwede magkaroon ng error eh. Diba? So, pwedeng hindi deliberate on the part of the LGUs, but yung accuracy can be solved if, for example, there is somebody in the CMCI Competitiveness Committee who is a statistician who would look at the data. Kasi just by eyeballing the data, you can actually see whether there are spurious data there. So I'm very happy when Sir Bill actually organized this regional competitiveness committees where NSO, the old PSA, actually a member sits there. Kasi that person is trained to think of whether the data are, it follows a medyo reasonable trend. No? Parang sila yung nagko-cross-check no accuracy of the data, the veracity of the data. So merong ganong level of screening. In fact, maraming level of screening. At that level, sa regional competitiveness committees, and then pagdating pa sa DTI, and DTI has actually been asking academic institutions to look at the data and see whether there are spurious data. So ganun hindi siya porket binigay ng LGU, tinatanggap na eh. There are checks on the data, I don't know if the term should be accurate, but whether there are, I myself, when I looked at the data, parang, oops, bakit ganito to? Parang hindi. So they go back to the city to review and ask questions about the data.
So the short answer is it's trust but verify. And DTI has independent academic institutions who engage in the verification process. Okay, I'm going to allow one more question and then I'm going to ask the last question. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Leah De La Rosa, the Department Chair of Environmental Planning in Durham College, a former colleague of Alvin, a researcher also. I think the best use for this is to excuse for those who ask questions. It's actually for planning purposes. That is actually the best use. And of course, you were asking about how you were able to show whether the data are accurate or not. Of course, when you said there are academic institutions, that is the best way to check it and to validate it. We have worked several LGUs and they themselves admit that some of their data were not necessarily 0.5%, but sometimes they just interpolated. I don't know if that's very general ba or what. The other data that they had. So I think one of the most important thing is the grassroots level where you took the data, how the data was taken, and of course, every other awarding committee will have their own objectives on how to use the data. But I see this, and since it's DTI, I think this is more of the planning context. I have students here. They know how important the baseline data is. That's why we don't want them to use data that are not verified, validated, and sometimes they have to go back to the ground to repeat the process to make sure that the data collected are correct. So I think that's one of the aspects that this presentation is. Maybe you could repeat this with the planning association, the largest planning association in the Philippines. I think you know it, the PIEP. And of course, the League of Planners in the Philippines. So they would know, because some of the CLUP, sorry to admit, are merely cut and paste. Because there are many, many times that I've seen most of them. So I've been practicing for quite sometimes 4 decades of practice. So you would know already that these data are very, very important. And we must safeguard this with this. So I think that's the question. How do you safeguard the data that you have collected? That's my prime question.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. And that's the perfect transition to my last question, which is all about safeguarding data. Okay. So this has nothing to do with cities anymore, but safeguarding the data. This is a question addressed to you, Abel, to Globe. How does Globe ensure data privacy and security? The SIM registration law was supposed to protect our data, but I still receive, this is a question sent in by somebody, but I still receive spam messages, some coming from a Globe number itself. Okay, so, I mean, I also receive a few spam messages from many different numbers. So how do you safeguard the data?
Yes. First and foremost, I'm not someone with extensive knowledge on that. But when it comes to spam messages that are being sent by Globe's number itself, I think it's a work in progress because sometimes hackers are able to hack even the towers, right? So they're able to present themselves as a different entity through the messages. But I think for all the networks, it's still a work in progress. But we are continuous in our efforts to strengthen cybersecurity.
Okay, thanks. Well, just a word of caution, don't click if you don't know.
You won't send any
if you don't
links
click, if you don't know, don't click. I mean,
Correct.
you just got to be practical about it. There's so many scammers these days. But on that note, we'd like to close our open forum session. Thank you very much to everybody. And let me turn you over to Ivana for our closing remarks. Ivana is from Coca-Cola and a partner of Liveable Cities, has been one since last year because we share and align with their vision for sustainability and something that we would like to work more closely together with Coca-Cola. So Ivana, let me turn over to you for the closing remarks.
See there? First of all, thank you, Bill, and the entire very efficient Liveable Cities team. Always, you always operate your labs very smoothly. So congratulations to you for doing the first lab 2025. And of course, our speakers today. So one thing that I've learned from this is that data doesn't create change, and we do, people do. And I've learned some key points from each of the speaker. One is that it's important to get the data right. Ofi and Alvin spoke a lot about that. And actually, Ofi, if you don't mind, I'm gonna set up a meeting with you after this because I also want to understand from a private sector perspective how we can leverage the existing data that you have to inform our programs, especially with the local governments. Two key takeaway is using data to drive action. Again, very impressive sharing by Mayor Estrella from Baliwag there. And Bill and I were talking only if all the mayors and the governors were to use CMCI data like that, we definitely be not only a sustainable and smarter nation, but really more prosperous. Number 3, making data work for the people. Abel, this is your show. You spoke a lot about, number 1, know the people and make the data work for the people. So what I'll do, and I spoke a little bit about it earlier during the open forum, I'll just share some examples under each point. So first, get the data right. We've seen in many meetings, in many discussions, that we have either incomplete or inconsistent data. And I mentioned earlier that we are a part of the National Plastic Action Partnership. This is chaired by DNR Secretary Tony, and the Coca-Cola Philippines President Tony Del Rosario co-chairs that, along with other private sector and civil society partners. It's also hosted by UNDP. And in our initial discussions, we've seen that there's a lot of data sets and they contribute to, one, conflicting policies, overlapping initiatives, and just overall inefficiencies. That's why the task at hand for NPAP, National Plastic Action Partnership, is to come up with this baseline study on plastic pollution in the Philippines. We're supposed, our deadline for that is in May. So that's up and running, and we'd be happy to share that with you once that's ready. And again, the goal here is simple, that before we attempt to solve a problem such as big as waste management or plastic pollution or pollution in general in the Philippines, we need to be able to agree on what the problem actually is. And that's, again, data-driven discussion. So this means looking at actual waste volumes, collection and recycling gaps, such as gaps in incentivizing local recyclers and incentivizing users of locally recycled materials. And that then informs where the investments are needed most. So without an accurate starting point, we risk making the wrong moves. Second point, use data to drive action. We're currently helping build a strong collection network for recycling. Again, after having studied and identified that an absence of a PET recycling facility poses a huge gap in the Philippine circular economy. As a system, Coca-Cola invested $1 billion to establish Pet Value, the country's only bottle-to-bottle recycling facility in the Philippines. It's currently operating, but not without its challenges. There's difficulty in collecting. We spoke about the infrastructure gaps there. And so the next job to be done is to build capacity among barangay waste managers, train them how to plan and train them how to implement their plan, and also train them to look for funding so that they can implement their plan. In our pilot in Rizal, there was a 60% increase in collection through these trainings. And again, we're talking barangay waste managers level. We've also seen that there is a lack of material recovery facilities, or MRFs. So now we have 2 pilots in Talavera, Nueva Ecija, and in Tagum, Davao, that supporting local governments and NGOs, local NGOs, in the establishment of MRFs so we could collect and recycle more. We apply the same approach in what we call the visible collection. So really more the consumer-oriented collection. It's called Tapon to Ipon, or Tindahan Extra Mile, where we partner with aggregators or collectors like Best, and they use blockchain to track the collected PET at source up to the recycling facility. So every bottle collected is logged digitally, ensuring transparency, accurate reporting, and avoid double counting. The program also uses an app-based reward system where over 3,500 sari-sari stores earn incentives for collecting PET bottles. So we collect data to help us collect more bottles for recycling. Lastly, make data work for people. We have a program called iStar. It's an online entrepreneurship course that we have with Tesla. And we use performance data to tailor support, track progress, and connect them with financing. When data show that our entrepreneurs, our sari-sari store owners, have difficulty doing face-to-face classes, attending these courses in Tesla centers or partner centers, we then help create an online course for them. So STAR became iStar. When data show that they're too far from our centers and also cannot go online, then we help develop iStar on the go, where the facilitators would then take the learning, take their laptops and all the materials with them to far-flung communities, just to make sure that the sari-sari stores in the mountains are still able to go through that course. We make data work for the people. And currently, we have over 100,000 micro-retailers that have used this program to grow their businesses. Data alone doesn't solve problems, people do. But when we get the data right, we use it to inform decisions and make sure it actually helps communities, and we turn insights into impact. Thanks again, everybody who made today's discussion possible, Livable Cities and our speakers. Let's keep the momentum going. Thank you.
We request everyone to please stay in your seats. We'll grab a quick photo up after our speakers. If everyone could please stand up now and then move to the center so that our cameraman can take the photo from the middle. So let's compress a little more so that everyone will be included in the photo. Thank you. There we have it. Thank you once again, everyone, and we would like also to thank our partners, Globe Telecom, the League of Cities of Philippines, and Coca-Cola Philippines for their invaluable support. For our participants joining here on site, we invite you to join us for snacks at the Stephen Fuller Hall, just right outside Tech Space. Our ushers will be helping you. Please feel free as well to follow them and kindly complete the feedback form on your screen or scan the QR code flash now. Your inputs help us improve future sessions, and you'll also be able to receive a certificate of participation. Thank you once again to our speakers for first lab of the year, Ms. Ofelia Templo, Dr. Alvin Ang, Mayor Ferdinand Estrella, Mr. Abel Capco, as well as Ms. Ivana Aguilan de la Torre for attending our lab this afternoon. Thank you once again to all of our participants, and stay safe. Again, snacks will be served at the Stephen Fuller Hall, just right outside Tech Space. Thank you. To our guests, you may continue your networking at the Stephen Fuller Hall, just outside Tech Space. Snacks will be served there. Thank you once again for showing up and for joining our first Lab of the Year.
So, provider po naman. You mentioned what